and I'll hop around on it just to get a feel for how, where the energy is with the audience. I wanted to start with our government. And this is probably the lecture that's going to get me in trouble, okay? I've been being watched since 1996. My phones have been tapped. Nobody's been bothering me too much, just monitoring. That's because I've been taking the spiritual end of things. And they figure, oh, just one of those new agers, nobody really listens to them, so they're not dangerous. They don't have that much information. They already know I have information. But interestingly, I haven't been speaking about the information the government doesn't want people to know about. This is going to be the first time I reveal some of this stuff. I haven't revealed it in New York yet, but that's due in December, because I have a big workshop planned there for December. We're going into a new millennium here, and it's about time we had a clue as to what's going on. Because we have been living under a lie. Not only since the 1930s, way back from the beginning of the seeding of our race here. For 200,000 years, certain things, certain factors were control factors in our evolution that were not intended to be a natural part of our evolution. We have been purposely made to be focused in a three-dimensional reality system, unaware of other dimensional systems. This has been done for repression of our DNA. We have DNA potentials that our scientists don't even understand yet. But there are certain beings that have visited here for millions of years that are very well aware of our DNA capacity. And that's why they've tried to repress it and suppress it. Because we have the ability to evolve beyond what they themselves consider themselves godlike beings. Well, we have the ability to evolve into such things. We have something in our DNA still. It was a gift that was given to us millions of years ago when we were first created as a species. It's called the silicate matrix. It's a 12-strand DNA code. It's in the morphogenetic template, the electromagnetic light-sound template that our DNA and our bodies are built on. It has been unplugged and not operational for over 200,000 years. We look at our history, and what we've been taught in school has so little to do with the reality of what history truly is. We have the Darwinian concept, and there's the concepts of, we were fish and we developed flippers and then we came out of the water. And all of these really interesting concepts because we have certain things in common with certain animal species. There are reasons for that because we were crossed with them at certain times and they were crossed with us, but that didn't mean we started there. We didn't. Our race was created 560 million years ago in literally a different dimensional field than what we're in right now, a higher dimensional field. We were an immortal race. Our bodies didn't decay and die like they do now. The silicate matrix gene code is a dormant potential within every person's body. Some people have more of it than others, and they're the ones that ETs want. When we have intruder ETs coming in here to bother people right now, they go for a couple of different things. One are called stellar substrand matrices in DNA. This is not in the books yet. This is new material. It's only been recently introduced in New York City. The stellar substrand matrices are extraterrestrial coding that appear in certain human gene codes. It allows them certain potentials to be taken through interdimensional portals without exploding, for instance. Because if you take certain coding, genetic coding, through a stargate, it will go into spontaneous combustion because it cannot expand on the morphogenetic level. Other gene codes are able to activate dormant coding and expand to hold the frequencies of the stargates. So when you're an invading ET race trying to covertly take over a planet, you want to create hybrids and you want them to have the highest coding possible. So they've been trying to trace family lines, trace them to find the ones that have the highest contents of the silicate matrix within the gene codes. Not just for hybridization, but because right now, because of the time period, we're back to that, stellar activation cycle, the people that have silicate matrix, more of it in the gene code, will begin to have spontaneous DNA activation because of the new frequencies that are going to be coming through the solar light spectrum. If that DNA activates, they become multidimensional people. They become able to see fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensional frequency bands, where our little manipulators like to play games. As long as we only see 3 dimensions, They can do anything they want from the fourth or anything higher. If our silicate matrix begins to activate in our gene code, which it will, as these vortices, 7 sealed on the planet, progressively open between now and 2012, we're going to be a real problem for any force that wants to control this place, because we're going to get wise really fast. They want to try to stop the activation of the silicate matrix. We're in a time period, it's so much like science fiction, it's hard to even speak about it because we've been so conditioned to science fiction that we can't deal with science fact, most of us. We can't deal with, on a real rational level, there's this big denial thing that happens, even with the most wanting to believe of us. If you will hit a level where you go, I just can't. I can't deal with this. I have to go back to my job. You know, I have to go see what's on TV tonight. I just have to ground myself and become just normal, just part of the program, like everybody else. Because when you start to see beyond the veils of illusion that we've been living here, you start to realize the manipulation taking place here. Part of the manipulation is ET manipulation, always has been. We don't know about them. Why? Because they didn't want us to, that's why. They didn't want us to know where they were or how to access them or to find out that we were being manipulated, because then they could manipulate us without any problem. But what we have to deal with in the next 10-year period, primarily, is not just ETs, it's our own governments. Our government, the United States government, became aware of the ET issue in the 1930s, not the 40s. They already had contact in the 30s. It was before Roswell, before any of that. There were treaties made between certain groups within the government. They wanted the ET technology. They were in the middle of wartime. They wanted as much advantage as they could. So treaties were made, and technology was exchanged, and we conveniently won the war. It wasn't by our own hand. There were technologies that allowed us to have the biggest and baddest weapons on the planet at the time. Unfortunately, it wasn't like you read in the history books. It wasn't solely the genius of our human minds creating wonderful war machines. We had a little help figuring it out. They came from the Zeta Reticuli. They're from the Orion star system primarily. That's where they originated, but they've also spread out into other systems, and they're interdimensional beings. They came here because they have an interest in what happens on planet Earth. They came here because they know about time cycles, and they know about stargates, and they know that ours was going to open, and they knew that would fire our DNA. That was going to cause a problem for certain control factors they have in 2 places. One is in a time space that's a little bit ahead of ours in time, where they are in control of human populations. And 2 is in something called parallel Earth. I don't deal too much with parallel Earth in the books yet because we have enough to deal with our own, but they're intimately connected. Basically, parallel Earth runs a bit ahead of us in time, and we are very, very connected with everything there. What manifests there will eventually manifest itself here, unless there's something done to change what's called a time vector. So we're going into a situation where we're dealing with parallel Earths, we're dealing with stellar activation cycles, we're dealing with ETs that most people don't know or acknowledge exist. We're dealing with so many things crashing in on us all at once, and so little time to learn what it means, where the pieces fit, and what to do, that it can be very intimidating. But it doesn't have to be. That's why I was given the information that I was given. If we can get out to as many people as possible knowledge of quantic morphogenetic science, knowledge that you have a silicate matrix and you can do things consciously to activate it, which means you can begin to bring in higher levels of your own consciousness, which will set up protective bioenergetic energy fields, electromagnetism, in your fields that will block some of their electromagnetic pulse technologies. There are things we can do about what's happening. First, I'll tell you a little bit about what exactly is happening. Well, we have government suppression of high-tech data. Our government likes to tell us, wow, we learned to clone a sheep. I hate to tell you, they learned to clone more than sheep. And they've been doing it for about 15 years. They've had a lot of messes, too, in the process. Cloning is just a little thing they've been keeping away from us. They have also developed interdimensional technologies. They're aware of fourth dimensional frequency. And they're aware that there's about a 90-degree shift of angular rotational particle spin between here and there, and that by knowing that, you can create certain formulas that allow windows or portals to be forced open between our reality space and the reality space of fourth, fifth, and sixth dimension. Now, when I talk about the dimensions, I tend to talk about them in groups of 3. That's because that's how they're structured. We are in a time matrix that is a reality field that's created out of 5 sets of 3 dimensions, 15 dimensions. There's not just 15 dimensions in the universe, in the whole galaxy and the cosmos, but dimensions run in sets of 15, and one set would be a time matrix. So our existence and a lot of others take place within the 15-dimensional system. The universes, they're called 5 harmonic universes. They have different angular rotation and particle spin. They take place in the same space, but they're invisible to each other, and the matter passes through each other because of the angle on the particle rotation. There's a lot of things that we don't learn in science class. There's a lot of things that scientists who discovered these things and tried to go public found themselves wearing cement slippers and having their careers destroyed and conveniently disappearing or dying of strange diseases. There has been a suppression of the fact that our scientists have found out a lot of these things. They have found out many things with quantum physics. They have verified the existence of certain places on the planet where there are stargates. They're trying to figure out how to open them. Of course, the Zeta won't tell them exactly how to do that. The Zetas know how to open some of them. We have been so lied to, it's enough to make you very, very angry. But anger isn't the only solution. It's a step in the right direction. It's the step after denial, after you get up, oh, I just can't deal with it. Just listen to these wackos talking about all this stuff, like they read too much, sci-fi or whatever. I never read any sci-fi, I lived it, since the time I was 4. After denial, we may hit anger and fear. After that, there's called a step that's effective action. That's where you say, okay, I'm going to learn. I'm going to find out what I need to do. I'm going to assess the situation, and I'm going to learn to handle myself accordingly, not the way I'm being programmed by the government and the media and the whole program out there. I'm going to step outside that. You say, wait a minute, what are they trying to distract me from here? Our great life of what's on TV is more important than what's inside your being and your soul. This has been done on purpose. We have been cultivated to become a race that's focused out here because our power is in here. They don't want us to learn about our power. Our government doesn't, and neither do the ETs that are messing with our government. Now, we've had suppression of technologies of all sorts. A lot of this has started from 1940s on, when more aggressive treaties were formed. In the 1940s, there were literal agreements formed by certain world government inside leaders and the Zeta factions that said, yes, you can go ahead and abduct our citizens. Just make sure they don't remember and put them back. Okay? They didn't say don't hurt them. They didn't say, oh, that's not nice, that's violating them. They didn't care. We've been sold out by the people who represent us. What's new? I mean, if you think about it, that's so far-fetched. When is the last time that we, even in America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, and like our president and all that, when is the last time we could have really, really put 100% faith in the integrity and truth of our president, or our political leaders? You know why we can't? The whole political system is structured in a way that if you're a nice guy, you can't get to the top. You have to learn to compromise and twist your priorities and do little things behind people's back just to get to a point where you could even be in a position of power politically.
Or you get killed.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Conveniently, hang yourself or shoot yourself or something. There's a lot of those. Oh, just couldn't deal with the pressure, commit suicide here, right? We are fed a lot of nonsense. And the scary part is, for generations, we've believed it. And we said, okay, well, the expert said it's this, so it must be this. We need to start becoming our own experts. Our lives depend on it at this point. Our government, as an entity unto itself, is not a bad thing. It's really composed of people like us, people that have been taught certain things and certain protocols more rigidly than many of us have, and it's been indoctrinated more heavily. They're people just trying to make a living, trying to do what's right, most of them. That's the ones on the lower to middle range. Even at the top, they know they have to do some dirty dancing just to keep themselves in position. But most of the leaders, at least in this country, have tried to serve the people in certain ways, while knowing they were serving a larger entity that nobody talks about. The larger entity is something that has been coined the world management team. It's an invisible entity, but it's an entity composed of humans. Humans that control, behind the scenes, major banking corporations within the worldwide network. They're multinational corporations with fronts all over the place. They have money from mostly black market dealings coming out their ears, so they can control and buy anybody or anything they really want to. Our political leaders here and in other countries have to kiss up to them, or they go away quickly. They find themselves vanishing out of power positions. The world management team has been here, it's actually been cultivated here for about 150,000 years. It's groups of family lines, human family lines, that were connected to Anunnaki family lines from way back when. The Anunnaki are primarily, they're a Syrian race strain. They're primarily on Nibiru right now. Our scientists haven't figured out that Nibiru, the planet, exists. It has a different orbital than most of the planets in our system. And it's not going to be back for probably about 3,000 years. So it's out of their range. But the forces there know how to use the interdimensional time portals. They manipulate here. There have been family lines created among us in human form that have more of a concentration of stellar substrand matrices within their DNA code. They are more Anunnaki than human. Some of them are more Nephilim than human. We'll probably talk about Nephilim a little bit here and there, I think. The Nephilim were a race strain that combined human and Anunnaki a long, long time ago. And they were superior to what the humans were at the time. And they tried to dominate the heck out of them. And they were kicked off the planet to allow humans to evolve. They didn't like the fact they were kicked off the planet. And they've always kept a vested interest here. We're dealing with people who look like us that are connected, and they don't even know it. They are connected to extraterrestrial family lines that have a vested interest in the outcomes of what takes place here. It's not as if this is a new battle. It's just not been a battle before because the humans have been asleep. So as long as they're asleep, you can put them where you want them and they can do what you want. We have a chance to wake up because for the first time in 210,216 years, I believe it is, we're hitting a stellar activation cycle. Interdimensional stargates are opening, and that's going to trigger our DNA. We have a chance to overcome the genetic blockages that were put in us, so we could not access what's called multi-vector consciousness. Multi-vector consciousness will take us into higher dimensional fields of perception. It will open up simultaneous perception of various time-space locations. This is where all our stories of reincarnation and stuff come in. It's not exactly reincarnation, it's simultaneous incarnation. Time is simultaneous. It's laid out more like space. So you can go from here to here to here. Like you can go from New York to California. If you know the coordinates, and if you know the mappings of the time portal systems, and the time rhythms that are involved with each, because there are natural rhythms when portals open and close, when they dilate and contract. We're coming on a time now when, hurrah for us, this is a chance for us to really wake up, if we could get it before they try to talk us right out of our own awakening here. We can start to see what's been going on around us, and we can start to take charge. Somebody has to, or we're going to be in trouble. Right now, with the suppression of the technologies and the little doings with our government, with the Zetas primarily, they've been dealing with the Zeta Greys. There's an agenda behind this, and our government thinks it's just controlling masses of people for basically real estate purposes. They don't realize they've been duped. The reason the Zetas were here to begin with was not because they're a poor little race that lost its home and needs to fix its bodies. So can we please have some of your gene codes so we can, create healthy bodies for ourselves? This is the line of nonsense that our government bought when it sold us out. The Zetas knew all along. Yes, it wanted to make hybrids for infiltration purposes here. They knew that they wanted the territory. They were attempting to take over from the beginning. But our governments and the people who are so full of themselves that they actually try to betray a mass of people. They're so full of their own egos and their own greed that they would do something like that. We're very blind. They figured, they're just little gray dummies, and get their technology from them and take them for a ride. Our government's been being taken for a ride, and they know it now. What's happened in the last couple of years is even the people out of the MJ12 groups and the people out of the world management team are trying to find a way to run for cover because they lost control of the set of treaties. They lost control of what's happening here. The intruders will do what they want when they want, and they don't care if the government likes it or not anymore. Part of the reason things have become very hairy, and it's been recent, is because for a while it wasn't certain whether the stargates would open. So it was kind of like, well, everybody's getting in position, but we won't go for it unless they really open, unless they're going to open. Well, in 1998, with the opening of the Ark of the Covenant, which is a time portal passage, that ensured that we were going into the stellar activation cycle, and yes, those stargates would open. See, once you start the stellar activation cycle, which has already been started, you can't stop it. It will commence, regardless, and it will either go smoothly or badly, depending on the energy balances left. Once it was known that the stargates were going to open, then all sorts of beings from various harmonic universes decided to get in on the Earth game. There's a lot at stake here, because we have something, we have a precious jewel that we don't even know we have. It's called the Halls of Amente. They're stargates, but they're not just any stargates. They're stargates that link on a vertical rather than a horizontal plane through various different star systems, all the way up into the highest pre-matter dimensional fields. They're the ticket out of space-time. The intruder races, which their manifestation here has been very small comparatively. There's been major intergalactic problems with some of these races. And some of them are, that we usually refer to them as the draconian matrix, which is a whole bunch of different race strains that come out of one consciousness matrix. They have been wreaking havoc on galaxies within 3 harmonics for a very, very long time before we were created. They have always wanted control over this space-time system. If they can get control over the main vertical portal system, they can control any incoming and outgoing consciousness. They can basically create a little world unto themselves, a universe that's not connected anymore to the rest of the universal and cosmic scheme, in their own lack of understanding of what it means to have divine connection to all that is, in their own lack of spiritual understanding of what that connection means. They will make decisions like this that cause harm to many different life forms. So we have a little pot of gold sitting in the core of our planet that our whole history has evolved around. Nobody told us about it. The Secrets of Amente, which is the name of book 2 in the Voyager series, begins to unravel the forbidden secrets of our evolutionary destiny. And I assure you, what is in that book is the truth. And I'll tell you why. Because I remember. It's not just because I was a contactee. It's not just because somebody just came down and picked me up in a spaceship and showed me some movies and told me this is how it was. Because they can do that and they can show you anything. I remember when I came in this time, into the baby body this time, I was fully conscious of fetal integration. I remember going from a 4th dimensional, non-manifest state of consciousness into fetal integration. I remember the process. I could describe it in detail to you. I remember where I was before that. And I remember many, many things that once you activate your DNA to the higher levels, you'll remember too. See, it's not just my memory. It's not that I'm somebody special or have a higher gene code and that I'm somebody elite compared to everybody else. I'm just an example. And the memory that I have is just an example of what's living inside each one of you. With the activation of the silicate matrix, you will find your stellar heritage, you will find your incarnational relationships, you will find your immortal self, who you were before you came here, why you came here in the first place. You'll find the parts of yourself where you made those decisions, because they exist. There are many wonderful things you can find. And that's what's wonderful about the stellar activation cycle that's coming. Though there's some scary stuff about it. It's really time for celebration. It's been over 200,000 years we've been trapped in these gene codes. We've been trapped in 3-dimensional consciousness, almost struggling to get out of our bodies, to the point where death is actually a relief, because you get to cross over and at least get off the tight clothing. You may have to come back, but at least you're free for a little while and you can think again. Because anybody that's done astral projection, or that's had a near-death experience, or that can get out there, out of the gene code a little bit, your consciousness goes, boom, wow, hyper-aware. You find levels of awareness that make you look very asleep here. And when you get really good at it, it's very hard to convince yourself to come back into the body because you realize what it does to you. We have a chance now to use the skills of our consciousness to expand the genetic potential of the body by calling into activation the junk DNA, which are the broken pieces of the silicate matrix. Science has discovered the junk DNA. They're the ones that call it junk. Just tell them, that ain't no junk. It's important stuff. We can do this. The programs that we're putting together, I mean, I've just founded a temple. It's called the Azurite Temple of the Melchizedek Cloister. That will deal with the spiritual teachings and will also deal with direct transmission of certain morphogenetic codes that literally go from bioenergetic field of someone who has them into the bioenergetic field of someone who doesn't, and it gives them the coding where they can start stimulating into activation the silicate matrix. There is a roadmap to higher dimensional identity integration. It's been hidden here for centuries. Some of it was in pieces of the ancient mystical schools. Pharaoh Akhenaten used it in his ascension schools. Being called Jeshua 12, who got rolled into the character we call Jesus, he used it 2,000 years ago to ascend people. And ascension means raising the vibration of your body pattern into the next harmonic, where you disappear from here and end up there. And you do end up in a physical body in the next harmonic up. It's about half as dense as this one. Progressively, we evolve by activating the silicate matrix. We evolve from gross matter to semi-etheric matter to etheric matter to pre-matter liquid light, and then into waveform. This is the progression of going back into what we originally came out of, which was pure consciousness. This is what we always were. It's what we are now. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience, not the other way around. We need to relearn this. And I'm very, very grateful that I've been given the information I was given. And I was given it because I worked my way up for many, many different space-time placements. I have other simultaneous incarnations in what would be past incarnations compared to this one that studied and devoted their whole life to following a path of understanding these things. And then I went into teaching these things. And then I got to experience what it meant in 39 AD. I was a woman named Miriam, and I was half-sister of Jeshua 12, and we were Essenes, and we were teaching the Ascension program that is now being brought out through the Guardian material. And it worked. I actually did the full bodily transmutation. So when I talk about this stuff, I will talk with passion. I will talk with conviction, and I don't care who believes me or not. I'm sharing what I know is true because I experienced it. I walked it. I'm not some channel with somebody that gives me some information and I regurgitate it. I have the contact experience, I have the history here, but I have my own memory. So when I talk to you, I'm trying to talk to your hearts as well. Somewhere in each one of you, there is the memory of many, many eons here. Because you know what's funny? When we go back to the last ascension cycle, they call it stellar activation cycle, 216 years ago, it was a mess then. The dark side got control then. But the people that were there are the people that are here now. We're back, all right? We just forgot who we were. And the ones that are remembering will begin to remember what went wrong at that time so it doesn't happen ever again. We fell under the spell of the draconian matrix 200,000 years ago. As a race, our DNA was altered, our consciousness was blocked, and we de-evolved and mutated into something that's nothing more than a little puppet on a string to those of higher dimensional reality fields. That is not our potential. That is not what we were created for. We were created as a guardian species. We were created as planetary guardians. We were created to stand as equals with the highest among the ET races. In fact, we were created as a vessel through which digressing ET races would merge their consciousness and take on a new form that would give them the codes that would allow them to go through full transmutation out of time and matter. We were created to be the genetic elite within most of the ancient stellar races. This is why some of those middle ground, middle harmonic universe stellar races do not want us to ever remember. And what's going to happen in the next 10 to 12 year period, depending on who wins this round, the majority of the people on this planet will either go upward into a very rapid acceleration of evolution, expansion of consciousness, activation of the DNA, or they will go into mutation that after about 3 generations will completely dissolve the silicate matrix coding in the gene code. And they will become something different. They'll become an animal form that no longer has the potential in its given form to integrate higher dimensional awareness, to progressively transmutate out of matter. That's why it's so important that we pay attention. That's why I go around having conversations like this with people, and half the time, a good portion of the room is saying, boy, she's nuts. And it's like, no, I'm not nuts. I'm informed. And excuse me if people have a problem with that. This group is wonderful. There's an awareness here already. I can feel it with you. Even if some of the things I talk about are a little out there, there's enough cognition here where you're very close to finding a space where that could, you could probably deal with that being the way it just might be. Which means you're just getting ready to be open to learning what you can do to help yourselves, what you can do to help this planet. Okay? One of the things we need to be aware of, is people say, there's no proof, there's no spaceships crashed on display out there, just put them in Times Square so we see them and know they're real. Of course they wouldn't do that, they don't want us to know they're real. If we want some physical verification of ET presence and potentially threatening things that are going to be done to us to try to get us under mind control here, we have the HARP project. Okay. See, they failed to tell the public some of the other little goodies that it can do. The HARP project can directly use ultra-low frequency and different high-frequency interdimensional spectra to directly affect your morphogenetic field. It can cause illness if directed the way, in a certain way. It can cause mental illness. It can cut off your ability to bring in higher frequency. It can bioneurologically block your ability to bring in your soul and oversoul and higher self-awareness. If they told the public, not that they were planning to use it for these things or anything, but just the fact that this technology could do something like that, do you think in America we would have tolerated that? Do we really trust anybody enough to build something like that if it could really do those things? Of course not. They had to lie to us just to get it so we didn't rebel when they were building the facilities. There's a lot of things we weren't told. They're beginning activation of the HARP project. They're also beginning activation of something called EMP technologies, electromagnetic pulse technologies. The ETs have given them enough understanding of grid mechanics, ley lines, certain electromagnetic fields that run in geometrical form through the literal rock of the Earth grid that connect with the magnetic fields of the planet. They have been learning over the past probably 30 years how to manipulate these things. They can, if they want to, create earthquakes. They can, if they want to, control weather patterns. These aren't fiction things. Our government knows how to do this. And it's been doing it in test areas to see what happens. There are certain viruses being created on purpose to get rid of certain elements of the population that certain government people think are not welcome here. They're tests. And the more these tests work, the more confidence they get. Because what they want to do is basically get everybody corralled under a control. It's called a frequency fence. Then they can weed out the gene codes they want and the ones that don't. And they can make the ones that don't want disappear. Right now, the ones the government and the ETs don't want too many of around are the ones with high concentrations of the silicate matrix. Because if too many of them activate at the same time, it's going to change the whole frequency for the race morphogenetic field, the 100th monkey syndrome. It'll flip it over for the rest of the people. None of them will be able to be controlled if enough people activate the silicate matrix on the planet. So right now, and this is stuff that's not in the book either, this is kind of recent things that were told to me. The agenda on the intruder side is to instigate a form of ethnic cleansing by having us kill each other. You know all our scenarios about Armageddon and World War III and all that stuff that everybody's getting a little nervous about because it's, year 2000 is coming up. Is it going to happen? Is something weird going to happen? Well, no, not in the year 2000. When we cross over there, we're just going to wake up the next morning and probably have a hangover from one heck of a celebration the night before. But there is a plan to use electromagnetic pulse technologies, run them through the grid and through the known electrical circuitry, because there's something called a phantom pulse. That is a pulse that's sent through the Earth core that has the ability to pick up any other electrical signal and run with it as a trace, as a phantom pulse. And they carry programs. They're almost like floating digital programs. When those floating digital programs come through, we're getting beamed with electricity from everywhere we turn. There's wires everywhere, there's lights everywhere. Your toaster becomes your enemy in this case. Unplug that thing. These electromagnetic pulse, phantom pulses, move into the human bioenergetic field. We need to realize that we are made of energy. We are electromagnetic phenomena ourselves. And we extend far beyond just the matter part of that. Our bioenergetic fields, we have a chakra system, we have an auric field, we have something called a morphogenetic field, which is the core level. It's called the Cathara level. And we get into the teachings of that. These are the levels of energy upon which everything else is built. These are the levels of our being that get affected by ultra-low frequency pulsing, by phantom pulsing. And there are beings who know how to use this pulsing to get exactly the results they want. The pulses, and they have started this. They started it in August. Actually, they started it in Kosovo. It was a test to see if they could stir up tensions by causing electromagnetic irritation in the auric fields of certain groups of people. It worked. There was a mess over there. That was just a test. In August, they sent pulses out in the U.S., 3 of them. They will build. They don't go out instantly. They build as a charge of tension, a static within bioenergetic fields that registers in the emotional body and the mental body, makes people uncomfortable, and they get more irritated. Now, you combine that with the opening of seals, planetary vortices, the planetary chakra system, the 7 seals. We're coming up between January 2000 and 5/5/2000. The 4th vortice, which is the one that lets in V4, 4th dimensional frequency, is opening. That's going to put a real frequency blast behind the pulsing that's being sent out. It's going to amplify the programs. It's going to amplify the tensions. On November 18th, they have the next pulse scheduled, and that's for the Jerusalem vortex. They already don't like each other a lot over there. It's never peaceful over there. They don't need any help. And then in December, on 12/12, they get my workshop in New York, they're going to be doing one in China. They are setting the stage to create that what will happen over the next 5 years or so will be a mounting of tensions within the political arenas that would culminate into us doing an ethnic cleansing on ourselves. They're confident that this would work because among our people on planet Earth, who we all share a certain element of the same gene code called the Turanician gene code, which is the original human, there are certain factions that have more ET gene code, that have more what's called Black Sun gene code than Diamond Sun gene code, which is the silicate matrix. There are legions of human beings that are impulsed through the intuitive facility by those matrices of consciousness. By creating wars, and this has been done in our history over and over, whenever there was a concentration of Diamond Sun, silicate matrix family lines, they would instigate trouble, and they would call in their own human legions to make sure they killed as many of them as possible and shut them up. Whenever there were books written that told the whole truth, that told the true ability of the body to ascend, not just how to worship some God outside of yourself, I mean, that's fine, God's great. But there's more to your relationship with God than simply praising a priest. You don't have to have a priest to be your intermediary. There were teachings that were put here that were beautiful, that allowed a human being in one lifetime to make a full connection to Source, to integrate its soul, its oversoul, its avatar, and its Rishi identity. The levels of identity you all have. You probably don't know right now. And in that process, the silicate matrix activates, and you progressively work yourself out of the time cycles of lower dimensional fields and into the higher ones. This was here at certain times, and whenever enough of the knowledge got out, The other side would come in and make sure the people carrying that knowledge disappeared. Made sure they didn't have a very strong hold here where their children could be born to pass on that knowledge. And they made sure that books were twisted, if not just destroyed. It's going to happen again if we don't wake up. If we don't realize this isn't funny anymore, this isn't Stephen King, this isn't Star Trek, this is planet Earth coming out of centuries of subtle mind control to begin with. It's so amazing to some of us to think that we could be going under mind control. No, not us, especially in America. We're free here, you know, nobody messes with us here. Think about it. Are we free? Do we know anything, really? We know what we're told. We believe what we're told to believe. And we're taught to not question and simply follow authority. That's a very subtle way of mind control. If you want to control somebody, you don't hold them like this, as any of the communist nations show, you know, that does create rebellion because if you're outwardly controlling someone, they will try to fight for their freedom. Unless you totally repress them and they just give up their will to live or be. Here, you give them enough rope and themselves. Just let them play. Let them think they're free. Then we can do whatever we want behind their back. Keep them distracted. Keep them into consumerism. Buy more, get more. You know? Keep them into all that distraction stuff. And you can do anything you want to do behind their backs and over their heads and under their noses. That's exactly what we have been raised in for generations. But there's enough awareness coming to the planet now. And awareness is a frequency. Everything is a frequency of energy. A pulsation pattern, a rhythm of energy. Every word I speak has an energy signature to it. So we're dealing with frequencies of awareness now that are birthing into this planet that haven't been here in a long time. We can get it now. I look at the people in this room, and this is a great room. I've gone to smaller groups like this before, and kind of walk in and go, oh no. You know, here we go. We have to deal with just real nuts and bolts UFOs. Well, there was a sighting here, and here's a film of it. It's a light in the sky. You know, this group is much past that, and I'm very happy for that because you can understand what I'm talking about. The general consciousness of this group, you do get it. You get it already. I'm just kind of maybe voicing and focusing a little, what you already know and sense within yourselves. So that's great. Then we understand each other. We have to look out for things like ARP. Yeah, what are we going to do about it? Go up and sit down the thing and threaten to blow it up. That's going to do us a lot of good, That won't help. We can help with things like that by learning the mechanics of our bioenergetic fields and learning how to block stuff like that from affecting us. Then, if we get really good at it, we can start doing what they do, which is remote viewing sabotage on people. We can learn to do that. If the government can train their little groups of people to do remote viewing, and not just viewing, they don't just view. They go in and they manipulate. They know how to access people's fields from the astral level. They can monitor, but they can also impulse you with their own thought patterns to do what they want you to. And they've been using this for about 20 years, actively. There are people that come out and talk about this, about the remote viewing and stuff, that were right in the middle of it. People that were in the military, that were in these programs. And then they come out of them and they try to talk about it, and the military really tries to shut them up very quickly. It doesn't, I don't know if anybody that's been killed for it, but they try to discredit them and make them look like loonies and deny the existence of the program. Well, I tell you, these programs are real. I've seen them because I'm trained in remote viewing. I was trained by the Guardian Alliance in remote viewing. And what I saw scared the heck out of me. Because there are government guys running around in the astral, in their astral bodies. Groups of them, manipulating groups of humans. It's bad enough we have interdimensional ETs that have all this ability. There are humans that have this ability too, and they are trying to mess with us. Sometimes fighting fire with fireworks. We're in the middle of a war for our consciousness, and we don't even know it. We walk around, everything's peaceful, no bombs are flying, it seems very fine. If you turned on your fourth dimensional perception by activating the fourth DNA strand, you would go to New York City and see it looks like a parking lot for spaceships up there. You would go into certain areas and you would see things that would terrify you that are here. It's kind of like what you don't see, I just heard you. It's time we learn to see. We have the ability to open our eyes. That's what the programs that we're working to do, the spiritual programs. That's why we went spiritual on it. Because it's not going to help to get people all stirred up and scared. Certain groups are ready. for the big time stuff. Other groups just would go into total terror and fall apart, knowing that we have been deceived, we are in the process of being deceived, and we're in the process of an attempted mental takeover. We can fight it. This group knows this. There's enough strength here. There's not fear here. Other groups that I've gone to, you know that if I said these things to them, they would just fall apart. They would go home, oh my God, it's like take a number for the local shrink office, because they would all be lining up because they would be in terror. So I don't give that information to them yet. What I do first is I teach them about their own interdimensional parts. And I teach them about something called Hoover bodies, which are three-dimensional electromagnetic grids that we have sets of, that when you integrate them, they're scalar fields. When you integrate them, they progressively activate the DNA and open the awareness to higher and higher dimensional fields. Ascension is really not that hard. It takes time to get the gene code that's been dormant for so long into activation, but it's not that hard. That's the silly thing about it all. Everybody's made such a big to-do about it down here. Everybody trying to hide what it was really about. There is a roadmap to integrating your higher level identity. Integrating your higher level identity will change your electromagnetic fields. It will also change the constitution of your body form and your consciousness. That is what will protect you. All these technologies that the ETs are trying to use on us and the government's trying to use, these are baby toys when it comes to real higher dimensional consciousness. They're little baby toys, but to us they're massive and huge because we've been denied even that much knowledge. If we can learn something that's called, people love this term, they either love it or hate it, Christ consciousness. Oh, the big term that the New Agers like to throw all over the place until you get nauseous. Christ consciousness is a real thing. They call it Christ consciousness because Joshua 12 came to model it for us. It's the full activation of the 12-strand silicate matrix DNA. That's what it is. And that's done by a bioenergetic process that once upon a time was taught in the ancient mystical schools. That knowledge was taken away from us because why? It gave us power. If we have the power to expand ourselves out of the phase lock our bodies are in, we're in phase lock here, electromagnetic phase lock, into 3 dimensions. We can expand beyond that. The ones that are manipulating from D4 are not going to be able to manipulate anymore. We have the ability to evolve beyond their manipulations. And they're scared of that. Because they've been doing this for a long time, and if we figure it out, they kind of think we'll be like they are. And if they figured it out, they'd want to destroy us. But unfortunately, it wouldn't go that way. Because at heart, the human species is a Christed species. It was created through the 12-strand silicate matrix, through 12-dimensional consciousness, with the ability to access 15-dimensional consciousness and beyond. With that comes an understanding of love and an understanding of helping and forgiveness, which is something those middle-level races that are in the middle harmonic universes don't all comprehend. They don't know how to love, so they know how to fight. Ideally, if we pull through the challenges that are happening right now, which we will. It says so, we're supposed to win this round. Even the ancient texts say that. They got the first cycle, we did this one. If we get to a point where we can block some of the things that are trying to be done here, take critical mass where, okay, say the frequency fence won't go up, we have a chance to totally transform, with this knowledge, totally transform everything on this planet, the way it's known. To build a new type of civilization. It's built on awareness and true brotherhood. It's going to be our job to do this, unfortunately. It's like after all this, you just want to lay down and go, we got to take a vacation for a few centuries or something. When the ideas that are being presented through materials like the Voyager's material, when they begin to really integrate, there's a lot of work to be done. There are a lot of people who would sit there and either go into terror at this information, or they would go into total denial and rejection if they're programmed to do that. The ones who get above those old programs, those old paradigms, who would start to see their own multidimensional reality and start to experience their own higher parts, are going to help lead the ones that don't see it yet, to help them heal. And a lot of them are going to come through kicking and screaming. It's finding a posture of how to help others without succumbing to what they're throwing at you. The people in the interior government, right now, talk about getting their karma back, they're terrified because they betrayed their people for greed. And the ones that they trusted are now betraying them. And they're terrified. What's happening right now is the Zeta factions that these agreements originally started with, since it became known that the portals were opening, the time portals were opening, the stargates were opening, there's other forces that have joined them now. There's something called the Dracos race. The Dracos are hybrids. They're created about 1 million years ago by combining something called the Dracon from the Orion system, which are very, actually dragon-looking reptiles, combining them with human forms, where you get kind of a more reptile than human, but it doesn't look like a dragon. It looks, walks upright and that kind of thing. They were banned here, along with the Nephilim, about 1 million years ago, right after they were created, because they tried to take over. They have a vested interest in here, because they've always felt, excuse me, you guys fell to that planet. That's not your planet, that's our planet. We were created there, you weren't. They want it back, and they want access to the stargates. They've joined forces with the Zeta. And what the Zeta don't get yet is if you trace the future timelines, they're going to take over the Zeta too. They're just using the Zeta to get in here. So the Zetas, some of them figured that out. In the 1980s, some of them asked for amnesty from the Guardian groups. They just said, get us out of here. This is going to be bad. And, we're sorry if we really messed up and we're messing with your people, but we'll fix the damage we did, but get us out of here because they're going to totally destroy us. Yes, they are. So we have something called the Dracos Zeta resistance, or the Zeta Dracos resistance, whatever you want to call it. They're resisting any of the Guardian race's attempts to help them solve their problems without inflicting themselves on another race. They want the territory, they want to do it their way. We are dealing with them. Our government is dealing with them now. And the government was prepared to maybe deal with the Zetas and the Little Greys. It is not prepared to deal with the Dracos, nor the Nephilim, nor the Nibiru ones, the Karndara from Nibiru. Karndara are a Dracos Nephilim hybrid. They're very nasty. They're very powerful, interdimensional metaphysically speaking. They are avatars. An avatar is a 12th dimensional consciousness, 10 to 12 actually. They can't go all the way up to 12. Only the light-coded ones can do that. But they go up to 10. They're a 10th dimensional consciousness. I mean, we're a 3-dimensional consciousness right now, so you can imagine what that might be like. They're interested now. We are literally sitting in the middle of what's going to become Avatar Wars. And unless we start becoming avatars and getting ourselves together where we handle our fields, we're not going to have a lot of control over what goes down here. We can all become avatars because every one of us has a level of our identity that is an avatar. The portions of your identity that are stationed in dimensions 12, 11, and 10 are considered the avatar identity, the Christ itself. The frequencies of your consciousness that are part of your morphogenetic field. They're literally composed of particles. Morphogenetic fields are composed of particles called part K, part Chi, and part Cum. They're ultramicroparticles our scientists haven't discovered yet. They will eventually. This is what the tangible structure of the soul is about. We're showing you, and showing science, high science, where the soul is an actual part of the human anatomy. And it's made out of the same substance that this is. It's just oscillating at a different frequency. All right, so the programs that are presented here are intensive. I have so much information I could probably talk to you for the next 12 hours and still keep going. I'm wanting to do that, it's scary. My first workshop, I was like, I've never spoken in front of a group before. Yeah, I don't know if I can do this. And the first one was like a 2-hour lecture and then a 4-hour workshop or something, back to back. And I actually did it. And the second one, I just went for 8 hours. I was like, ooh, it just comes natural. So I just I'll go on a flow and just flow with what seems to be the next thing to say, that's the right thing. If I were going to teach you any one specific thing, say, teach you your tangible structure of the soul, teach you how to use Keylontic science, teach you exactly what they're doing with the Montauk portals now that they're reactivating them, and they're trying to connect them to Giza, which is something I didn't touch yet. All of these things, each one of these little subjects could be talked about for 8 hours. Each one could be a book. We don't have time to make all these books, to publish all these books. What I'm going to try to do, I think, for this group, I'm going to sum it up with a little bit of my personal experience. I just want to look through here and see if there's anything that I missed. I jumped around all over the place, which I do a lot. When I use the Mylars, I tend to format it, for what's going up on the board. That keeps me on certain lines. That's not always good. It's better to have an associative process happening, where we talk about this, 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 and this, and then bring it into a picture this way, rather than just a linear thing. So I'm appealing to the feminine nature, the intuitive nature, in talks like this. But I do like to at least bring it into a logical sequencing also. So let's see if I missed anything that's real important to hit on. I'll take questions after. I'm going to save time for that if there's time. How long have I been talking? I don't
There
even
will
know.
be time.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay. One thing, I've mentioned it a little bit, but I haven't given you a lot of information on it. It's something that on a personal level, even if we didn't have to deal with ETs, you need to be aware of. We're entering a stellar activation cycle. It's going to affect your DNA. Now, there are mutations in everybody's DNA from what's been done to us by manipulation historically from the ETs. There are ways to straighten out those problems. You don't need science and laboratories to do it. There's an intrinsic process of consciousness using chelantic science that you can reformat the scalar grids that the DNA is built on. If it's not done, like if there's a time to get spiritual and really take it seriously for once, this is it. Because if your bodies happen to have a gene code, and nobody knows what's in a gene code right now, we're just getting information on how to even look for something like that. There's a condition called molecular compaction that can take place if the morphogenetic field is blocked in certain ways and cannot expand to hold higher frequency. Now, we've already had 3 vortices open on the planet. 3 the seals have released. They're the ones that correspond to dimensions 1, 2, and 3. The reality field here is made of first, second, and third dimensional energy pulsation. No big deal. No major things. It's accelerated certain things as far as weather patterns and things, but it's not created any major mess. It's not affected our DNA that drastically either, because we're dealing with 3-dimensional frequency. Beginning on January 1st, we begin a cycle of every 4 years, another vortex opens till we get 7. We have one in the year 2000. That's the ESA vortex. We start to get 4th dimensional frequency coming into the grid. It starts to stimulate our 4th DNA strand, because the DNA strands are great. The whole thing is so beautiful and eloquent. We have 12 dimensions. Each one of the DNA strands is keyed to one of those dimensional frequencies. So as we start to have 4th dimensional frequency come into the planetary grid, it will start triggering activation of the dormant 4th strand codes. That's great. That'll help you to develop astral projection and all of those things very easily. If you don't have distortions or blockages in the top of the 3rd strand or in the 4th strand, if there are blockages there, they will be manifested in the DNA, also in the body systems that are built on the DNA. Those areas will not be able to absorb that frequency. So, if you look at a morphogenetic field, which is a very good way to look at it, as a crystalline structure, let's say it was a quartz crystal. You know how they come in clusters with all little points? You can envision your morphogenetic field like that. Now, frequency comes into the morphogenetic field from the higher dimensional morphogenetic fields, moves in, and as long as it can move through those crystals, everything is fine. It actually expands the crystals. That's how growth occurs. But if there's something in the formation of those crystals, in the shape of their geometrical relationships, where certain wave patterns can't enter, those frequencies coming in become like a hammer on the crystal. And if you hit a quartz cluster hard enough with a hammer, it shatters. This happens to the morphogenetic field too, personal morphogenetic field. If you are exposed to high frequency scalar waves from interdimensional fields, like people that do time travel and Montauk boys, all that kind of stuff, they all have morphogenetic field damage because of genetic blocks that did not allow the morph field to expand enough to handle those new frequencies. It's going to affect all of us differently because we all have a different level of the silicate matrix in the DNA. The more silicate matrix you have, the more flexibility in the morphogenetic fields you have. So the more your DNA will activate and sequence itself to be able to handle the new frequencies. There are certain things we all share as far as blockages in the DNA. These can be changed. There are certain what they call seals that were put in. They're morphogenetic frequency seals that were literally put into the race morphogenetic field to block certain abilities from us, to keep us 3-dimensional. We can learn to release them in our own bodies. This will begin the process of preparing our bodies to handle the new light spectrum that's coming here. And it's funny, the scientists already know the solar light spectrum is changing. I know there's a guy, Val Valerian out of California, or no, Washington State. He has a huge website. If you want to know how bad it really is, I don't have his address with me, but you can probably find it by scanning for the name, by putting the name into a search. Val Valerian, I believe it's Valerian,
Yes.
I think.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. He's got a lot of information on the nasty stuff that's going on. I try to focus on the positive stuff. I'm not going to tell you how bad it is unless I can tell you what you can do about it. You know, why bother? I'm just going to get people upset so they can be miserable for, the last days. It's not our last days. This is the first days. We can learn to protect our bodies because there are going to be certain effects. It may be an acceleration of physical disease in the bodies. It may be a remanifestation of diseases we've overcome, and they come back. It may be emotional problems emerge. It may be mental problems emerge, where certain forces start to try to vie for the personality structure. Some of them are within the self. Repressed portions of your own subpersonality patterns, of your own incarnational patterns, those kind of things. Others will be manipulation, because they are the intruders that are literally trying to take over certain bodies. So they want operatives. Like a collective of operatives to do their thing here. We have a lot to deal with here. But we can do it. If people like me can come out and have an audience as good as you, it's actually listening to me and not writing me off as some airhead that doesn't know what she's talking about. So people like that, I get mad. And I want to take the Reuters books and throw them at their feet. So, did you look in there? Airheads don't write that stuff, excuse me. We're dealing with 15-dimensional physics here, excuse me. And the psychologists would like to say things like, oh, delusional. Who's delusional here? You're dealing with 3-dimensional consciousness. I'm showing you the structure of 15-dimensional consciousness and the levels of mind that correspond to it. And you're going to call me delusional? Excuse me, you're missing something. I get really tired. Not for me, because I'm tough. I've been around these cycles a long, long time, and I've been through a lot. But there are people out there, lots of them, that are having encounters, that are having scary experiences. They don't know if they're in their head or outside of their head because of the interdimensional stuff. And they are being totally disregarded by the medical community and the psychiatric community. They're being put on drugs and in wacky wards because ETs are real. We need to spread the word and the awareness, to be open to learning. We don't have a lot of time left here. When I was my first expo that I did was the New York City Expo last year. When was that? Do you remember the date on that? It was May of this year, in fact. And for me, it was a disaster. I didn't do my debut the way I wanted to. I got up on a panel with a bunch of PT experts, and one of them started telling us how, the Elohim created us, and they are coming back to guide us into the next millennium. And you just listen to them, and, they know more. They have advanced technology that proves they know more than we do. We should follow them. This is part of the mind control nonsense that's going on. You have half of your New Age people. They're good-hearted people, really trying to reach for their higher identity, having the higher identity hijacked and programmed into something scary. I ended up getting up there and just I couldn't take it after a while. Listening, I really couldn't. It was a disaster for me, I guess. I don't know. I didn't plan it. But after listening to her with her, praise holy Elohim, and the other ones, the other ones are just saying, maybe they're real. Yeah, they have metal saucers and things like that. Between the two extremes, I just get up there and I said, and nobody gave me my turn to talk. And as you can see, I like to talk. So after sitting there for quite a while, I was there for quite a while, wasn't I, before I really got to say anything? And the moderator, he blew his chance because he was supposed to actually let me get my 2 cents and it didn't. I got up there and I said, there's no time for this left. We are in the middle of an attempted mass global mental takeover. And I'm not pitching fear here. I'm trying to get people to pay attention so they can figure out what to do to stop it. Okay? We can stop it. It's not a big problem if you acknowledge the problem. So I kind of made a scene. Without meaning to. It's just another thing showing that I can get passionate about my work because I believe in it. I don't need to do scenes here. I didn't really plan to do that one either. It just came out that way. Where you get very tired of the lower level of consciousness telling you why you don't know what you're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about because I've dealt with intruder ETs since the age of 4. My mother was an abducted. I was an infiltrator. All right? My mother was abducted while she was carrying this fetus. And it was imbued with Zeta coding. It wasn't supposed to be, but that wasn't the original soul plans for things, but it was hijacked. But because of that, I came through with some abilities that they hadn't planned on. I could read their matrix. By the age of 4, I had conscious memory of fetal integration. I remembered moving in with the fetal pattern. I remembered having the fetal pattern manipulated. And I remembered a good portion of my incarnational history. By the age of 4, I couldn't talk yet, but I remembered. That made me very, very dangerous as far as the intruder ETs. I was dangerous, so they wanted to get me under their control. I began physical abductions at the age of 4 at the intruder's hands, where they tried to mess with the gene code to block the memory, and they tried to use the genetic material for cloning at that time, and later they wanted to use it for breeding, because it's a particular gene code that has a high concentration of silicate matrix, which allows for things, if you control it, that you might want, that you just make sure you control it or it gets out of your hands. When I was 7, I was very fortunate that I met the Guardian Alliance. The Guardian Alliance is a very special group. The one most noticeable thing about them, they're an interdimensional, intertime group. They really come from the future. In the year, I believe it's 5,260 AD, something like that. They come to help us here because we're their past. They're coming to change their past. The primary members of the Guardian Alliance are human. They're the original human. They're Tournisian. They're taller than we are. Some of them are about 12 feet tall. They're very beautiful physically compared to, what our race is right now with its mixed gene coding. And they have abilities that we would look at as godlike. But they don't want us to look at them as gods. That's not why they're here. They do believe in a God, in a central creative force and source that they honor and uphold very much. They'd like to teach us about that so we could find that connection in ourselves. But they're not just human either. The Guardian Alliance is a huge group. There's, I believe, over 10 million races represented in that organization alone. And that organization is part of a bigger organization called the Interdimensional Association of Free Worlds. This is huge. The drama we're in is absolutely huge. I was fortunate because they knew me. The Guardian Alliance knew me from other incarnational space-time locations because they had worked with me before. They found me in this time frame, and they saw the manipulation, and they stopped it because they knew why I had come before I even knew why I had come here. I had come to help with this project, to help with this stellar activation cycle. All of us made an agreement to be here. We just forgot it when we came in and the veils of the DNA went down. The Guardian groups are more aware of what we are and who we are right now than we are. They can give us back the keys to our DNA so we can start remembering. And that's what they're doing. From the age of 7 through the age of 18, I was caught between a battle of the outer manifestations of dark and light. And of course, must be a reflection of my own karmic heritage, because as within, so without, as they say. Above and so below. We're dealing with race karma here. A repeating of our race karmic heritage, of the battle of dark and light within ourselves as creator gods. It's a huge interdimensional spectrum. To bring it down to earth enough to understand how to manipulate in it while we're down here, we need to understand that there are two sides, and the healing of that is bringing them back into one wholeness. First, you need to learn to hold your own self so the other side doesn't suck you in. Then you have to learn to gently ease the other side back over into healing. First, let's worry about ourselves. Get ourselves all right, aligned, get our fields protected, then we're okay. When I encountered the Guardian Alliance, they also took me the abductions, but I don't really call them abductions because I agreed after they had introduced themselves to me. And both of my first encounters with each group took place in daylight. When I was 4 and playing in the driveway next to my aunt's trailer, and a being came up behind me that I thought was a child at first, and I turned around and looked, and that was no child. It was the size of a child, it was a little gray. And I wanted to run and scream, but I couldn't move because it did one of those little, they have a little silver rod that does a bioneurological block where you lose the motor skills. So that was my first, and then I was lifted up into a craft. when I was 7, I was approached in these lilac bushes that I used to play in at my grandmother's house, broad daylight again, and I was approached by one, again it was a gray, but it was a blue-eyed gray, which I'd never seen before, with a negative sign. And it froze framed me, maybe so I couldn't move. But it said to me, it didn't use a silver rod either. This one was able to do it just with projection, which was a little difference there. Shows you that, they're more advanced if they don't need the outside technology. It said to me, you don't have to be frightened anymore. We're aware and we're going to help you. So it was kind of interesting from a child's perspective, seeing the same type of being, one being your terror and the other being your savior. It's kind of strange. The little gray that I had met with the blue eyes, I call them blue eyes for short, took me to meet the rest of the guardian lions. They would pick me up in the evenings in ships. They have craft, but what they are plasma craft. They're actually interdimensional light vehicles that become solid when they come down here, but then they transmute through the levels of matter density and then pop up someplace else and get solid again. So they can take you on these. These ships actually work as buffers for people whose gene codes can't tolerate full portal transmutation yet. To go through a portal, you have to be able to do something called enter Merkaba. It's a state of building a light body around you. It's releasing the phase lock on the cellular code that allows the energy fields to spin in a certain way, that allows the body form to turn into light or antimatter, and then back manifesting in someplace else. So during my experience in childhood with these different groups, the one group, the guardians, were teaching me about the mechanics of how to do these things. They were using Merkaba mechanics to take things places, and others. The others were using mechanical technologies to get similar results. I was taken to underground military bases. I was subjected to very strange-looking apparatus that I learned later were perversions of kinetic science technology, which use certain light symbol codes as waveguides to directly block and alter the morphogenetic field so you can get control, literally bioneurological mind control over people by manipulating their DNA. I was subjected to those things. I was used for readers. They tell me I have 3 male children of what's called the Borenthian race, which is a kind of hybrid specialization one. It was created on the intruder side. I've never met those beings. I also have one child named Charlemagne that was created by the guardian side. And she is part of Zephalium, which is the highest castes of the Zetas, combined with the human imprint and some other higher ones. It's a very personal journey that I have been on. I was part of a project called Project 014. It was one of the forerunners to the Montauk Project in '83. In Project 014, they would trace certain gene lines and family lines, and they would abduct. They would have the Zetas abduct. The government would have the Zetas abduct people with certain gene lines, children. They would take them in and get them under mind control. Then they would use their DNA, and they would make clones. This is the part of the Montauk thing that I don't think anybody's talked about yet. This part's going to get me in trouble once it gets out that I'm talking about this. But what the heck, you heard it here first. If I disappear, know you heard it here. You know? And remember this. Tape it and let other people know. They would do cloning. They would clone the ones that had the ability to go through the time portals. And that's when, in the beginning days, when they were just beginning to learn how to do the Montauk stuff. Montauk are time portals that are literally forced open within the interdimensional grids. It's a technology that can actually end up blowing up a planet. It's not meant to be done. It's something that the Zetas actually did that to their home planet. They forced a dimensional blend. And it created a black hole that basically destroyed both the planet and its parallel, double. This is what Montauk's going to go into if they keep playing with it the way they're going to. But they're planning to use it for some major other things, that we have to worry about more. But I was part of the forwarding projects to Montauk, where they made clones of this body, and they sent them back in time. They tell me I have one in about 1922. I have one in 1945, one in 1955. There's around 12 from what I hear. Even the Guardians don't know exactly how many. I'm not the only one that's part of this project. I was just one of the sheep that they used for this experiment. What they do with the clone bodies is they take over, they allow the avatar matrices that are 10-dimensional consciousness without body forms of their own, they allow them to embody within the higher coded bodies. They create little armies and little operatives here. And usually, once the cloning experiments are done, they destroy the original. Do you know why? Clones don't have a connection to the soul matrix, which is the 4th, 5th, and 6th dimensional level of identity. The original does. The connection between the clones and the soul matrix is the original. If you want to have a body pattern, take it over and have it not have a higher identity, you clone one with a high coding, kill the original, and then you have a being that has no soul connection, or any possibility to try to make a soul connection. This is what they're trying to do to this whole race. If they were the ones to get control, which they're not going to be, our whole race would be mutated into a form of being that had what's called the silver cord, which is a frequency of energy that runs between the lower dimensional parts and the higher dimensional parts. That silver cord would be severed permanently, and it would be that there would be a genetic mutation that would make it so that silver cord could never be reattached. That's what they want to do to us. We're not going to let it happen. So when I talk to you about this, I lived through the pain of this nonsense. I didn't have a childhood or even an adolescence. Actually, my adolescence was kind of funny. Missing persons quite often. I took the rap for being a runaway quite often because it was much easier than explaining, well, sorry, I had an appointment on a spaceship. If when I was, 12, 14, 16, try to explain why I missed a week of school and sorry, Dad, I didn't come home. If I tried to explain that I had been taken on spaceships, they would have had me locked up someplace. And I was trained by the guardians to never, ever tell. Not till I was older, not till it was time. So my freedom wouldn't be taken from me, my freedom of speech and my freedom of thought. Because you know what happens, even today, if you have, say, a teenager that's having encounters, and having missing time or being taken places and knowing it, if they go in and talk to anybody, they rush them off to a shrink and they put them on drugs. That's scary. They take away their mental freedom chemically for even talking about these things. So I was advised all along to not talk about it. So I took the rap. Okay, I ran away. For Joe, I don't know. New York somewhere. It would have been like cover stories, conscious cover stories. Because if I told them that I was on spaceships being trained in interdimensional physics and things like that, they would have had a real problem with it. And I would have lost my freedom. It was also a torturous time because the intruders were trying to kill the body. Once they realized, once I hit age 16, I started getting the training in what intruder agendas were. And the guardian started to explain to me the drama that was taking place down here. That's when I became a real danger, because the intruders knew that once I hit adulthood and the guardians gave me the okay to talk, boy was I going to talk. And I was going to expose as far and wide as I could the plans that were taking place here. So they tried to kill me numerous times. They tried to use the impulse technologies on me. Got to the point where when I was 18 years old, I tried to kill this body to get out of it because they had me so trapped in it. It was terrifying. Fortunately, I guess, the guardians intervened. They allowed a near-death experience to happen. That is a profound experience, and I can explain to you what it is. I like how science tries to rationalize it as just a fleeting thing that happens as brain chemistry fires. Sorry, consciousness came before brains. They haven't figured this out yet. When you go into a near-death experience, the consciousness is raising in vibration. It's dislodging itself from its immersion within the gene pattern, and it's going into 4th dimensional frequency first. That will be perceived. There's a repulsion zone, magnetic repulsion zone, which is where particles spin against each other and they create like a magnetism between the 3rd and 4th dimension. When you move through that dark tunnel, you're going through the magnetic repulsion zone. Your consciousness is moving through that frequency. And then when you go into the light at the end of the tunnel, you're hitting 4th and 5th dimensional frequencies. That's what it will translate to you because it vibrates higher than your consciousness. What is higher than your consciousness and vibrational oscillation rate will appear as light. This is what the process of a near-death experience is. At some point, if I ever have time, when I don't have to talk about ETs, just to let people know what's going on so they start to really pay attention, I would love to teach people about near-death experience, about what to expect and why you don't even have to be dead to have one.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for that.
And in fact,
I'm glad you said that.
if you want to be prepared, I mean, if, you know, we have two ways of getting out of here. We're either going to do it the traditional way, which is drop the body and die, or we're going to transmute the cellular code, which takes a little longer, and not all of us have enough time to get it done within the time frame that's available. So a lot of people are going to choose to leave the usual way. In facing death, so many people are terrified of this. We're not taught how to die here. We're not taught how to live. We're not taught how to die either. Dying is easy. There's a way of disengaging your consciousness from your chakra systems. When you get into situations where they're prolonging life by medicating you to death, where you can't even keep a thought in your head, they're blocking the natural process half the time. Or when you cross over, if you do manage to drag yourself out of that gene code, you're going to be so disoriented, you're not going to know which end is up. You're just going to flip through a bunch of errant thought patterns that you had that you never assimilated before. There are ways of knowing your bioenergetic system, that whether you're going to live or die, whichever you choose, you'll do it much better. You'll do it with awareness and consciousness. You will not have to use medicines to keep you alive. You'll be able to say, well, I guess the body's like, you know, kind of worn out now. Maybe it's time for a new reality space. You won't have to commit suicide. That's the chicken way. Only the ones that don't know how to do it, like I didn't when I was 18, try to kill it. If you want to leave, you do soul integration. And you become your soul identity by integrating the fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensional aspects of your being. From that level, you have the right to make a decision whether you're going to stay or whether you're going to leave. And you also have the mechanics, where you simply say, okay, if I choose to go, I will just arrange for either something to happen to the body, accidents, you know, there are no such thing as accidents actually, or you will simply lie it down and leave. Yogi masters know how to do this, you know. So this is stuff that's been here, little pieces all along. That's what I'm talking about. It's high science. It's high truth. I hope that, I don't know how long I've been going here, and I could probably go forever, so just like kind of go, like, you know, we're getting close to time. I mean,
Close, but this,
I'll leave a little bit of time for questions, but I think I'd like to get like a drink of water before I do that. I just want to wrap up, I think, with what I was talking about we need to be aware of the personal stuff as far as the DNA, so we can make our transitions into these spaces, into these energy frequencies, happen a lot more smoothly. We don't have to be scared, and we can overcome this ET problem. They explained something to me one way. There's a lot of people, especially in the New Age movement, that like to totally deny the existence of intruder ETs. Oh, there's good ones, but there's no nasty ones. Love, light, and cluelessness, I like to call it. There is also love, light, and awareness.
yes.
And that is what we teach. And boy, you know, I've made a lot of enemies in the New Age circuit. Yeah, and that's just too bad. I'm telling you both sides. We're in a polarity universe here, and the answer is unity consciousness and Christ consciousness, but you're not going to get that if you pretend the other side of the polarity doesn't exist. It's just like saying, well, I don't like gravity, so I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. It's going to affect you anyway. Now, if you know how to mess with your DNA and activate it to certain levels, you can transcend the effects of gravity. Yes, you can. You're not going to learn to transcend it if you ignore it. You're not going to make it go away by pretending it away, by pretending it doesn't exist. You need to learn the mechanics to transcend certain conditions that are affecting people on a mass level. This is what a lot of the New Age stuff doesn't teach you. It teaches you some real good stuff. Thoughts are things. You know, these kind of things, yes, they are. But we are dealing with a mass thought field here, a multidimensional mass thought field. We're dealing with race karma, not just personal karma. We're all connected to this or we wouldn't be here right now. We need to acknowledge both sides and acknowledge the solution as bringing the two sides together. And it first has to happen in ourselves. That's where the personal work with the New Age stuff comes in, where you work with all sorts of different things to release block things here and there and everywhere else. There's lots of good things you can do. You can do toning, you can, you know, go to shaman school, you can do all sorts of things. The easiest way is to learn Quantic morphogenetic science. That goes beyond the chakra system into the core of the blueprint. That's where things can be shifted from and changed from. That's why I'm setting up the Institute for Quantic Science. It can be applied to healing. It can be applied to manifestation abilities. I mean, yes, when you get good at this, you can learn to make things happen. You know, there's certain codes on that, though. You have to have, look, you only get to have certain knowledge once you've demonstrated that you will use it fairly and not use it to harm other beings or things. You know, there's a lot of leeway. I mean, look at Rosetta. They get to play with a lot of technologies and they're doing a lot of harm with it. But I would hope that you would be interested in some of the programs we have to offer. Okay, I'm just getting going with these, and I've been under a lot of attack. more and more each workshop I do, because each workshop I do gives the next level of data. There have been attempts, just stupid little things, arranged to make sure I didn't have stuff done on time or get there on time. But I still managed to get there.
You did today.
Yeah. This time, what was interesting, we have something coming up. It's a trip to Egypt. We've been asked to go to Egypt because we've been given the codes on the Hall of Records. There are 3 electromagnetic frequency seals on the Hall of Records. The Hall of Records, I love this. There's like a lot of the Egyptian government people, we know there's no Hall of Records in there. You know, we've used ultrasound, we've used all sorts of things. There's some chambers, but there's no Hall of Records. People are expecting this big library or something, like you're gonna find this hidden room in the Sphinx, open it up, there's gonna be bookshelves, you know, with these ancient texts to tell you the secrets of the universe. I hate to disappoint everybody. It's not a physical room with books in it. There is a physical space in the Sphinx that was used specifically for merging 3 beings' consciousness together that would blow open a frequency seal, that would open the ley lines on the planetary grid to allow the universal memory banks to download. That's why it's the Hall of Records, because it has all the information that's recorded, and not only what they call the Akashic record, which is kind of like the local universe level, it has everything that's in the Dorotura record, which is the 15-dimensional matrix plus 3 levels beyond that aren't dimensionalized. The Hall of Records modulates how much of that information can digitally download into the planetary grids. When it's in the planetary grids, it will affect your bioenergetic system and go into your DNA. And if you have the DNA that corresponds to those frequencies, it will translate through into awareness. This is what opening the Hall of Records is about. We're also, which is connected to this, is releasing the first seals on the halls of Memento. They are the stargates that lead between Earth and the planetary core of Tara in Harmonic Universe 2, which is Earth's future self. They're opening. We were entrusted with the coding to do this, and it won't be given to us till we get there. We have some of it. There's certain tonings that have to be done, certain energy dynamics, galactic science at its best. So we're doing this trip. Just so happens, we had the ads going out in the UK. They're going out in like Nexus magazine in the United Kingdom. Deadlines, we're crunched to the deadlines. Just so happens, my husband ends up in the hospital right before them. He's in the hospital because he's been being messed with big time. He's in a recovery unit because it started to mess with his head. I love this person very much. I'm living the nightmare of the reality of ET manipulation. I have seen it affect my family. So if anybody doesn't think, and I'm speaking from the heart, I have seen things that would scare most people very much. There's a person I care about right now struggling to regain his balance because something other than himself is trying to use his consciousness. I have seen this with other people, but it wasn't so close to me before. So I'm noticing, I'm just kind of taking a mental note. The closer I get to revealing the bigger and bigger and higher level truths, the truths that will set you free, that will give you the information you need to make a stand here. Because you're not going to make a stand and go down the White House and throw a fit. I mean, this is going to get nowhere. You know what I mean? And the people that are trying to get involved with the lawsuits, release these records, who cares anymore? We have 10 to 12 years to get our act together. It doesn't matter who hid what when. Just acknowledge it was done, and it's time to learn what we need to do. So there's a lot of stuff you can cut out of your way of wasting time, you know, that a lot of the people in the UFO movement and the New Age movement are trying to do. A lot of it's a waste of time. You can jump right up to what's happening now. The more you will try to find your higher levels of awareness, the more you will find forces within yourself trying to pull you away from it. You'll find the inner skeptic. You'll find the dweller at the threshold saying, I can't actually believe this is true. What can I do? You know better than that. You have to retain that focus. Wait a minute. Am I going to choose to be a multidimensional being, or am I going to settle for being a three-dimensional animal? Did God create me as an animal, or did he create me as a divine being in his own image? Even the books tell us that. And the image wasn't a male gender figure with long flowing white beards. It was in the image of spirit, of pure consciousness. We were all created in the image of God. We are all pieces of the consciousness of God. It's about time we remember. So that's what my programs are about. trying to think of one last thing to say, but I think
Well,
questions will probably be the best thing.
Why
There's
don't
time.
you take your water break,
Good idea.
run through them in the
They're calling themselves ascended masters. Some of them are, most of them aren't. Just because somebody got to D4, that means you died. I mean, excuse me, you didn't ascend exactly, you died, you know. When you die, your consciousness goes over to D4. You could technically say I ascended from D3, but that is not what's really meant by the concept of ascended mastery. Each one of us, eternally, has a level of ascended mastery right now. Remember, time is simultaneous. That level of you exists in the frequencies of the 8th Huva body. The way to get that into your body here, so you know yourself as that, is to progressively integrate the Huva bodies that are in between. Your lighting, your scalar grids. So that's the process, and that's what part of what we teach.
So from the ascended master's perception, under the law of one, then all activities are parts of ourselves.
Oh yeah. As you, it's funny, as you progress through Huva body integration and you move from being in gross matter density to semi-etheric density and then up to etheric density, you get less and less outside of you as you contain more and more within you. And eventually you get to the state where it was all within you anyway, and you know yourself in the state of Godhood. And that's when you start to really get the cognitions, and they're neat when they start to flicker through you here, where you look around you and realize it's all not real. You realize that right now in this moment, you are an infinite consciousness stationed all over the place, that we are the same being with everything else in the universe out there. We are each little faces of the consciousness of God. And once we put down our little costumes, we are the Gestalt identity called God. So we're all part of it. The law of one is understanding that. And as you progress with integration, you get to that. And it starts to get funny. Because I know when I'm looking at you or any other audience, some of them hate me. They really want to argue with me. I was like, I'm arguing with myself. Yes, you represent a part of my miasmic pattern. We are symbol people to each other. And down deep inside, we are all the essence of Source, even the bad guys. It's just they know that less than we do. That's why it's our job. When we get integrated, we're going to have to teach them. Because for everything to be healed, it's kind of like modern surgery. Doesn't work, cut it off. It doesn't exactly work that way because it'll mess up the whole system if you cut things out. If you can heal something and get its energy working the right way so it's in harmony with the rest of the system, that's how true wholeness and healing occur, in the body or in the consciousness of the mind of God. So when we have our dark versus light dramas taking place in these lower dimensional fields, it's a process of the God mind trying to harmonize itself. And nothing takes place outside of the God mind. So the good guys and the bad guys exist within the God mind. And we're just it's kind of like maybe God trying to balance his mental chemistry. And I'm not denouncing the true magnificence of the God energy, because that's a very small analogy for a very big concept that is called God. But the oneness is there, and we will evolve to understand this. And part of that evolution can be made very simple, by simply using the roadmap. I mean, you can take any path you want, but there's short ways and there's long ways. We've got kind of one of the shorter ways to do it. There's still work involved. There's still learning to change your perspectives. Like, wait a minute, when it comes to home, that means like when I make decisions about business, I'm not just thinking, I can scam that guy and I'll make a few extra bucks here and that kind of stuff. Some of us are so ingrained in these patterns because we've been taught this, that this is survival here. When you begin to try to integrate higher identity, you need to find a place of integrity within your being where that comes first. But then you will find the universe responds and sends you more of the same. You'll get what you put out. So there's a lot to it, but it's not that hard to do. Does that, you asked a question and I can go forever. So okay. Yes.
Next year, when the inner 7 planets align on May 5th, what's the ramifications of that that's going to take place then?
Well, the alignments of the planets is actually kind of a visual manifestation of greater things that are taking place within the time cycles. That is the official opening of the 4th vortex at Giza. That's if you compare it to the heart chakra of the planet, that's when the 4th vortex is opening. It begins with what's called the Day of Transcendence on 1/1/2000, and then it progresses. There's a vibration that's going to be running through the grid, And then on 5-5, when those alignments take place, the energy fields generated by those alignments will affect the energy fields of the Earth, and it will create the release of the seal, fourth Fortis seal. And that's when we start to go into time shift. That's when things start to get weird.
So it's vibrational more than physical?
Oh, yeah.
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 It's vibrational.
Yeah, you may have some problem with the tides,
Yeah.
from what I've
Mostly
heard.
it's
There may be
vibrational.
some strange movements with the tides, with that
It'll
alignment.
be locked and loaded then when that happens, right? You want to be locked and loaded when it comes.
Yeah, we haven't even dealt with that too much because there's so many other problematic issues that have had to come first. Like the trip we're doing to Giza is to release the seals on Hall of Records and Halls of Mente, but it's also to counteract what they're doing on 1/1/2000. They're having a big celebration over there
Yes, they
at the pyramid. Now, the Great Pyramid was built to protect the Halls of Mente and the Hall of Records. They're energy phenomena, areas in the Earth grid that were important, so that's why those monuments are put there. Certain forces have been motivated to create certain activities there that will throw certain things out of balance. There's a connection in the ley lines of the grid, and this is going to be interesting, between Montauk in New York, between that circle they just discovered in Miami, between something that's a quarter mile off the coast of Siesta Key, where I just was instructed to move down because there's energy work that needs to be done. There's a connection between those points to Giza, and there is a plan to do some things that will make the energy grid balances very precarious if they're carried out, which could lead to tectonic cracking when the vortice is open. So we're being sent in to do mechanical kinetic work on the grids. And this is, I'm going to get into some of this in the New York lecture. This is some of the newer stuff that they're saying, like, they won't tell me until it's time to tell me, because then I'm in danger if I know it beforehand. You know? So there's connections happening with more important things than just the stellar alignments. We have alignments taking place in the grids and on the planet that are aggressively being pursued as we speak. Yes.
What we call or talk about the universal consciousness, will this get a step higher after 5-5? In other words, will there be a little bit more of a wake up?
Oh, there's going to be a great wake-up call. The big one is going to be in 2012, when we all hit fifth strand activation temporarily, whether we're ready or not. What's going to happen as the vortice is open, 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th? Our DNA is going to trigger, and however much of your DNA you have straightened out enough to sequence properly, you're going to bring more and more and more higher level awareness in. Things are just going to dawn on you. Direct cognition. Things will just come. You will get more of your incarnational memory to start to remember who you were as a soul being before you came into a body. So yes, that consciousness is going to be coming into the planet, into the people's DNA, and it's going to progressively raise the frequency of the bodies and the consciousness and the planet itself.
It's just the Mayan calendar, you know, they're always saying that everything ends at 2012. I mean, they sort of like knew all this.
December
Yeah, they're the timekeepers.
Right.
Mayans were very interesting. They had a little interesting habit. The reason they were timekeepers, they did something with their morphogenetic codes where when they would cross over in death, they would immediately reincarnate. So you had generation after generation actually the same beings. They didn't wait like 400 or 500 years between their spaces. They continually flipped over and carried the coding so they would have the full alignment of time, which meant they could take a time vector and run it forward or backward, or sideways or any other way, and get a read on what was out in those areas of time. So they have a specialty that in that particular genetic code, they geared it toward being able to read time vector matrices. So they did know. They were the timekeepers. And that's why they knew, because they did it genetically.
Are you talking about the wingmakers?
I've heard of the wingmakers. Somebody has sent me some things on them. I haven't had time to go into that yet, to even research them. And I asked my guys, and I said, you want a transmission line? I said, wait a minute, I have like 4 to take down so far, and if you knew what my schedule is like, I have to take things like that and put them in a pile and say, okay, if I ever have free time, I will get information on that. Okay? If it's directly important to the program I'm teaching, to what the Guardian Alliance is trying to get into people's awareness, they will give me information on it as part of their program. If not, I can ask them just about anything, and they will give me a rundown on it. And they would do that on that too. They said, oh, you'll enjoy this, you know these guys. And that's all they told me, was
Yeah, they're
the
from
ones involved with
they're
the,
from the future.
yeah, with the wind makers. What is it?
Engineer.
Engineer. I get a feeling on that, it's not my guys. They're not ones that I directly deal with, but it's like a family of consciousness that has its own thing going. And I know that if I look into it, it'll be another book, and I don't have time for that one right now, because that would be just, it would be not something that's essential for me to know, for me to teach in my program. The people that are doing Wingmakers will bring out what needs to be done on that project. So it's not something I have a lot of data on. But I could get it, but somebody else will do that one, you know?
What's the connection between the Presidio and the Montauk?
Between what?
The Presidio, the Frisco?
I'm not, nobody said anything
Well,
about
supposedly
that.
it's set up very similar to Montauk was there.
Okay, I know there's 4 others like Montauk on the planet. They haven't told me the location of them, that may be one of them. What they're telling me about Montauk right now is not so much locations of all the underground bases and all the other things. They're telling me what they're going to do with it in relation to the series of portals that link between the United States and a couple other countries and into Giza and into the main primary portal things. Because I'm on a team called the Portal Protection Team, and that's where my information is geared. There's a lot of people who have more information on things like the maps of the underground bases and as far as locations of different things. There are people that have expertise in that. That's not my expertise. So, you know, I probably can't answer that any more than what I just did.
You seem confident that the Zetas and the Dracons aren't going to succeed. How do you know this? I mean, you're expounding the thing like we're going to make it through this, and we're going to be exposed to these. But all these frequencies with HARP and the pulse that you're talking about, how are you sure that they're not going to put a block to this?
I'm modeling a posture that is essential that we take. Our thoughts are things we create with our thoughts. If you want to accomplish something, whether it's a little thing or a big thing, you simply don't allow yourself any other option. Because if you do, you'll find a way to make the other part come true. I have found to be an effective person in little things in life. If something needs to be done, I'm just not going to say, but what if? I don't allow myself. I could go on forever, terrorizing myself, looking at the odds of this succeeding with the odds that are stacked against us. And I could spend my time lowering my thought patterns and the vibration of my thoughts, which lowers my body and keeps my DNA suppressed, into worrying about, oh my God, how are we going to get through this? If you notice with any thought, listen just for a minute, if you notice with any thought or any word, they each have a vibration to them. Some thoughts vibrate higher, some vibrate lower. In the choices you make, in the words you use outside and to yourself, you are creating energy vibration patterns. If you fill your mind with ideas of fear, what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't work out good? What if it's scary? What if it's bad? You're creating lower vibrating thought patterns. Our success here depends on raising frequency, making our bodies, our minds, and our planet vibrate higher. If I were to go out there and say to people, look how bad it is, this is really scary, you know, the odds that we're going to survive this, not very good. You know, if I went out with that attitude, first of all, nobody would want to listen to it. If it's that bad, why bother knowing? If we can't fix it, don't bother telling me. Let me enjoy my ignorance of bliss, thank you. You know, if the Guardians didn't know, we stood a fighting chance here to really wake up and turn this potential negative into a great positive. They wouldn't be making the effort to give this information. If it was hopeless here or didn't look good, they wouldn't bother. They'd just let us go until it blew up in our faces.
Why do the Guardians let them go this far?
It's not their job to protect us from our own choices.
Free will. All right.
They'll intervene when they can, but just like you can't keep your child locked in the closet from now until eternity to keep it safe, you have to let it go out. If it makes mistakes or falls on its face, you feel bad and you want to help, and you do help when you can. But you have to allow the children to to develop independence and the ability to make choices that are effective. And that's why they allowed us to let it come this far.
I just had a question.
In your book, you say that the pyramid is the trademark of the Anunnaki.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that a little bit, and how does that relate to the Cydonia region on Mars?
Okay, well, that was once an off-planet base when there were certain wars taking place here, and I believe it was the second seeding, which we're part of the third seeding of the race here. We were wiped out twice by the higher ones fighting over whether we were going to evolve or not. The pyramids were part of Anunnaki culture. That was part of the Syrian strains. The Syrian consciousness is very mathematically and geometrically oriented. Some groups of consciousness and their body forms that they make are more geared toward intuitive associative processes, where they have more fluid, like the Arcturian consciousness is much more fluid. It has its mathematical translation, but it's not into solid forms and objects. It's a different type of process. With the Anunnaki and the Syrian strains, and the Anunnaki come out of something called the Anahazi, okay? They were the original light-bearing, founding Syrian race that the Syrian races came out of. The Anunnaki got mixed up with the Draconian matrix and lost part of their higher dimensional coding and became mutated genetically. But they still carry a lot of the attributes that were part of the Anahazi matrix. And the Anahazi were very much aware of the geometrical relationships within the morphogenetic field of things. Pyramids are created, and there's different forms that are created for different reasons. Pyramids are able to they work as scalar grids, as three-dimensional scalar grids. They will take energy and frequency coming in and bend it in certain ways that allows amplification of certain patterns to occur. That's why you can like mummify things by sticking them in pyramid shapes and that kind of thing. So the Anunnaki used them as kind of like power generators within their cultural structures. So when they came to other planets, they would build them also there to use them for the same purposes. There were ways to key in the pyramids in Giza, for instance, into the old Atlantean crystal generators, the smaller ones that were still left and they're still here. There are ways to focus those energies and bring them in, and you could literally create things like laser energy, things that could direct the levitation of rocks, for instance. Like, that's how the pyramids were created. They weren't hauled up there, like they said. When they were repaired, they were the last time. But before that, they were created through this focus of energy. So the pyramids were a technology, just like we have technologies in, we have like little cameras in boxes and things. Well, they have big technologies and big pyramids that they use as interdimensional teleport stations and all sorts of things. I'm going to say a little bit more on the Anunnaki. The ones that built the pyramid for the Anunnaki of the Syrian Council, they were the Anunnaki that decided to honor their highest evolution and stick with the Anahazi of the Syrian Council. They were the good guys. All right. The ones that weren't the good guys were the Anunnaki Rebellion, which were the ones that sided with the Draconians and fought with the Syrian Council over whether this race was going to be allowed to evolve, and other races too. So the pyramids here were built by good guys, primarily. There's a couple that were put in there that weren't even from the Anunnaki. They were actually from other groups like the Kurandara. But basically, most of the primary ones that we've identified are under the Anunnaki influence. Is that the good Anunnaki influence? Does that round up the question for you?
Thank you.
Okay.
Two kind of specific Montauk-related questions. One, is something being planned for August of 2003? And secondly, are they trying to plan for potential time jumping of the entire planet, perhaps to move it out of the way of these positive incoming rays?
Hey, that's what we're doing. It's called the Grid Zone Project. That's what the book gets into. Have you read the book at all?
Part, but I'm wondering if the Montauk is working specifically against that.
Yeah, it's attempting to work against that. Montauk, from what I get, I'm just getting the rundown on Montauk because I was not allowed to have a lot of it because it wasn't time to talk about it. And see, when they put it through a person, they give you information, it becomes available to anything that can read the matrix down here. So there's certain information they only give me when it's happening. When it's time, now it's time to know. With Montauk, there's a huge connection to something called parallel Earth. Here we go to sliders, as far as a point of reference. We got Star Trek, now we have sliders. It's not a joke. Parallel Earth has fallen under the control of the Draco set of resistance. In a stellar activation cycle, the time vectors of Earth and parallel Earth progressively blend and become one. By 2012, they will be the same time vector. We will merge with our doubles. Montauk wants to make sure that happens, because Montauk is being controlled by the overlords of the Draconian matrix, which are of the Black Sun genetic substrand matrices. What the Guardian races are trying to do, and what my work specifically is about, and the groups that we're forming, is to create a time vector severance between Earth and its parallel, plug in this time vector into another parallel that sidesteps that one, so that doesn't manifest here. Because if something isn't done, it's going to manifest here. And then we're going to be in trouble. Then it's going to be that what if. So we're here to make sure the what if doesn't happen. And we're doing heavy duty time vector realignment mechanics. That's why we're going to Egypt first, then we're going to Peru. And we're going to a couple other places that are key places between the harmonics of this planet and Tara and harmonic 2. So we're doing grid mechanics. Montauk is totally tied up in it, and they're trying to use it to make sure that we don't get out of this time vector. They're trying to make sure that the Bridge Zone project doesn't work. They're trying to make sure we stay under the control. So that's where Montauk fits in. There's a lot more detail to it that will be revealed as they go along, they told me. So.
I'm gonna throw out two names, 2 words for you, just let you go with it.
Okay.
You decide how long you want to go, it's getting late, so it's up to you.
Yeah, I'm getting tired.
Yeah, but I'm gonna throw out the Essenes and Melchizedek.
Well, Melchizedek, I am one. Okay. I'll deal with that second.
Whichever one you want to do it.
Now, the Essenes and Melchizedek actually go together, because the Essenes were one of the many race strings, actually, that carried the full diamond sun code matrix, which is the full silicate matrix potential in their DNA. And they could activate that for ascension. They kept the codes alive on the planet in the race morphogenetic field. And they were traced way back through, they went back through Hebrew, through Egyptian, all the way back through the early root races. There were certain families that were the keepers of the codes. They would always carry, they were the blue flame Melchizedek families. And the Essenes were one manifestation of the blue flame Melchizedek families. So were certain ones within the Egyptian Pharaonic lines. So were certain ones within ancient Atlantean cultures, and even before that. So the Essenes and Melchizedeks fit together. I'm real affectionate toward both of those names, because the last time I was here in incarnation, I was an Essene, and my name was Miriam, and I was the half-sister of Jeshua 12, and he was a wonderful older brother to have, and he taught me many wonderful things. And we were Essenes, and we practiced the Essene. You know, it's funny, some of the Essene laws that's come down, if they only knew what went on in those temples, they would be really amazed. Because we were very aware of genetics, all right? We didn't need the term DNA to understand what happened when you combine certain morphogenetic fields with other morphogenetic fields. There were seedings done purposely to create family lines that would extend outward in time. And those family lines are still alive today. Some of us here may be a part of them. So there was a lot of neat things that went down in the Essenes that never got recorded. But basically they dealt with protecting the knowledge of ascension and protecting the codes of ascension, which are the silicate matrix codes. And I'm considered, what I'm known by the Guardian Alliance is, my name is Onea Kananda Melchizedek. And that's because I always was, since the first time I entered incarnation into any of these systems down here. I was part of the Blue Flame Souls group, and I still am, once you already kind of always are. So there's a lot. I did a whole workshop on explaining Melchizedek and what that name really means. There's a lot of Melchizedeks popping up these days. Melchizedek priesthoods. I mean, the Mormons actually have their higher priesthood as the Melchizedek priesthood. And most of them are very, very patriarchal. Well, excuse me, I've been trained by the Melchizedek cloister. That's my family. That's the governing body on the cosmic level of all the little priesthoods that come down out of it. It's a family of consciousness. And in the cloister, which encompasses the rest of the other family lines, it is not patriarchal. The teachings of ascension are not patriarchal. That's a twist that they put on from the higher universes. It was meant to be equalist. It was meant to be egalitarian. And it's about time the feminine voices started standing up and say, excuse me, we don't buy this stuff anymore. You know who gave us the male God concept as a physical being outside of ourselves? It was part Anunnaki, part Nephilim. All those who wanted us to think God was outside of ourselves, not inside of ourselves. So when we get into Melchizedek, we get into the very core of what's been happening here, not many other levels with ourselves. That's as far as I'm going to go with Melchizedek here. I could go for days on that one.
No, you did fine, thank you. You want to take one or two more? Or?
All right, two more.
Oh, John, go ahead, John.
I just, what thoughts come to mind when you think of things like Ark of the Covenant, and are they energy sources, or are there more than one? Or
Did you read the book yet?
No, I haven't, but I can tell you now that I will. I haven't.
It's described in there what it is exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I haven't been exposed, but you've
Yeah.
created,
It's a
you've
time portal
generated
passage.
an
They think it's a
interesting-
box. That was the diversion.
About some of the ways you asked the question yet.
Okay. We'll forget two. I'll take two more. There's two
Okay,
people here.
thank you.
Okay.
I was just a little surprised when you said that the avatars would have more because I thought they were such high consciousness that they wouldn't move.
That's what a lot of people assume. They think that as soon as you get out of here, you become a perfect being that has no imbalances. Now, if we understood a little more about the physics of dimensionalization, it would make sense why we can have, even at very high levels, things that are showing polarity. It's polarity that creates the conflict and the imbalance. Polarity in a dimensionalized system, the very structure of dimensionalization depends on the separation between electrical and magnetic. That's what creates dimensionalization. So you will have, to some degree, polarization all the way down the dimensional scale. Now, as you work your way back up it, the avatar level is the last level, because that gets 12 dimensions of polarity. Once you fulfill that 12th level and pass from liquid light back into antimatter, that is where the harmonization takes place. That's called the Rishi level of identity in personal terms. It's once you hit harmonic 5 that you don't have imbalances to that degree anymore. And when you go beyond that to the levels of ascended mastery, you don't have that either. And there are ascended mastery consciousness levels that look down and they know they have their families that are totally out of balance. They also know for the whole game within the God mind to take place, it requires both sides, or you won't have manifestation. So it's it is all perfectly in divine order. It just can get really uncomfortable down here sometimes. You know?
Okay, I think there was one more. Anyone wanted to?
Could you say something about the time-space illusion?
Time-space illusion? You mean the hologram?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of those
I knew
questions
you
that
were
could take
gonna
6 years to answer.
Yeah.
All right, you don't have to answer
She
that,
might have
sorry.
pretty much kind of covered a lot.
Well, what would you like me to say on it? Give me a little specific and I can do it quick.
Well, there's a conflict in my mind. People talk about karma, and then other people talk about the simultaneity of time. The two don't mix. I mean, how do you resolve
Actually,
it?
they do.
They do.
They do mix, yes. All right, time is simultaneous. So you have various aspects of the self broken down into different space-time locations, okay? They are linked through the soul matrix, which is the center point of consciousness that they come out of when they fragment down into the lower harmonic
That's a higher
universe.
being, would you say?
Well, your soul matrix is your next higher level of identity. And the soul matrix actually creates 12 pieces of itself to go into the lower harmonic, which creates cycles of 12 incarnations. All right? So your consciousness is connected to the consciousness of other beings. Now, it comes down to something called a miasm. A miasm is a blockage within the morphogenetic body. If we go back to the morphogenetic field being a crystal body that's made like a quartz crystal cluster, to use an example, it would be like in a clear white quartz crystal cluster, black crystals thrown in that are different shaped, that don't allow the energy to move the right way. We collect these depending on the thoughts we think, depending on what we do with our energy when we're here. When you have karma, you're taking the miasms you built up, the misalignments in the energy field that's in this life, A over here, they bleed through into B over here and into C over there, and they begin to amplify each other. Now, we have a whole program that got into something called the Palladian seal that was placed in the gene code that made us into walking miasmic messes. Karma was not supposed to be the way we evolved. We were not supposed to die. We were supposed to transmute. And there's been things done to us that have made karma something it was never intended to be. But there isn't really intrinsically a conflict between those things. It just would take probably a full day workshop to get you to the point where you say, oh, I get that. You know what I mean? I think that's the best I can do with that one this time frame.
I think he's begging for one
Just a
little one.
little-
He's begging for one little one.
Is there a connection, or, you know, if there is, right, between all this, you know, you're talking about the patriarch, you know, the Deane and the Knights Templar, are they like in this mix anyway?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll do it. That's good. Did
I
she
think I'll
answer
just
it?
leave it at, yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think she answered it.
Because I'm not going to get into them and the Masons and a whole bunch of other guys that are really trying to get me right now because I'm
But they're
talking
all-
about their doctrines.
But they're all connected, I mean, they're all part of it.
Yeah, they were part of, actually, they came out of the families of the Essenes that were called the Jesuit Nines. See, when Joshua 12 was sent in, there was a diversion sent in by the Middle Council Elohim that was a 9th level avatar rather than 12. It was meant to take some of the teachings on a little bit different journey that would lead to not quite as much freedom for humans. And they weren't necessarily bad. They were kind of like, well, there's many shades of gray between the dark and the light. They were part of the Elohim that wanted to suppress us here to make sure only certain strains of us evolved the right way. Joshua 12 and Joshua 9 got rolled into one character we call Jesus. The Templar strains came out of the Essenes and a couple other strains. They were actually the birth lines from the Joshua 9 lineage. And then there were other lines coming out of the Joshua 12 lineage. And I know a couple of those. I'm not allowed to name them. Is that
I
helpful?
think that answered it for you. Thank you.
There's another-
Sure.